This is AM Agenda. Thanks for being with us. Joining me now from Adelaide, Labor MP Amanda Rishworth, and in Melbourne, Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer. Good morning to you both. Kelly, on the issue, I want to get through a couple of issues. The hospital funding restored to Victoria by the federal government. You'd welcome that?
We'll certainly welcome it, but it's another backflip by an incompetent government. Welcome in this instance, but it is a testament to their Act Now, Think Later strategy. They've ripped $1.6 billion out of hospitals right across the country. They're restoring $107 million to hospitals in Victoria. The reason they did that was based on bogus figures that they said that the Victorian population had gone down. Of course, it hasn't. We still have a number of questions that need to be answered by the Health Minister. First and foremost, what is she going to do about the $475 million that she is still proposing to cut over the next 4 years to the Victorian health budget? Secondly, what is she going to do in terms of restoring money to other states? Thirdly, in her temper tantrum and foot stomping exercise that she's gone through in restoring this $107 million, she's also declared that she is going to rip money out in other areas of the Victorian budget. And finally, there are constitutional questions she needs to answer as to why it is that she is going to provide that money directly to hospitals rather than through the state government, which seems to undermine her national health agreement.
Amanda Rishworth, this does put pressure on one of those points that Kelly made when it comes to the other states that have had money taken away or their health funding reduced. They will want the same treatment.
Well, of course, what we've seen from the Premier of Victoria is massive cuts to the health system and hospital system, and we've seen patients really hurting because of this. So what the Health Minister, the Federal Health Minister, has done is restore funding to ensure that that patients actually get seen to know. It's interesting, Kelly was concerned that this will go directly to hospitals. Well, I think she should be rightly concerned. If it was to go to the Premier, it would go in the way that other health dollars went, and they were cut. So, of course, we need to make sure that this gets to patients. We need to make, well, it is true, Kelly, $600 million cut by the Premier of your state. Now, we need to make sure that this money does get to people that need it, and that is why we are going to directly give it to hospitals so that they can spend it on frontline services. Frontline services. Well, look, quite frankly, Kelly, we are having to do this because the Premier of Victoria has been irresponsible and very uncompassionate in the way he's dealt with hospitals.
Let's move on. I think, to be honest, that both sides are to blame to a fair degree, but let's move on. I want to talk about the Greens Labor stoush. Amanda Rishworth, the funding for the jobs package is in doubt. The Greens say they're not going to back the $1 billion in savings unless you and the government changes the mining tax. So that's going to be another hole in the budget.
Well, of course, what the Greens are doing is playing politics with this, and it seems very surprising to me that the Greens would not support a package that was looking at supporting jobs in Australia, looking at supporting small companies, and actually funding that through actually reducing tax incentives for very, very large companies. In fact, the top 20 companies in Australia. So I find it very, very surprising that they would be blocking this important legislation. But of course, then the test comes to Tony Abbott as well. He keeps saying that he supports manufacturing despite his actions of saying he'll cut money to Holden's and the car industry. But the question then comes to Tony Abbott, is he really going to support small to medium-sized business in this country get a fair go? Is he going to support jobs, and is he going to support manufacturing?
Kelly O'Dwyer,
the question will be to him.
Does this raise questions over Tony Abbott's blue-collar credentials, so to speak?
Well, not at all. We very clearly said that the most important thing for the manufacturing industry is to get rid of the carbon tax. Now, the government, of course, has introduced a carbon tax which makes manufacturing unaffordable. We are now seeing manufacturing go offshore because it is cheaper for companies to manufacture offshore than to have the $23 a tonne carbon tax, when we see in other nations supposed carbon taxes of around $4 to $6 a tonne. So that's the first point. The second point, though, is this this whole issue around the Greens and Labor somehow being in conflict is a complete farce. It's a complete joke. We know that this is simply a separation of convenience. There is a Labor-Greens government. Nothing has changed since Christine Milne made her speech. They are still guaranteeing supply. They still have confidence in Julia Gillard. They're not changing the date at which the election will be held. They are still governing together, and there is not one thing that either the Labor Party or the Greens would say that they regret about their coalition government.
I want to finish with one last thing. This is a gaffe from Tony Abbott yesterday. There was a gaffe last week we made a bit of with Wayne Swan, but yesterday Tony Abbott said he couldn't put a strict time frame on abolishing the private health insurance rebate. Of course, he wants to restore the private health insurance rebate, but that is what he said in that news conference yesterday. The transcript was, well, it was amended, his office writing restore, correcting, which was a gaffe that Mr Abbott made at the news conference. Is this something you need to be careful about? Obviously, it's not a great thing, but when both sides make gaffes in election years and campaigns, Kelly, it can be awkward. Does the office need to be careful not to rewrite the leader's words in this respect?
Look, I don't think anybody is in any doubt about Tony Abbott's commitment to private health insurance and our health system. It's this government that's ripped more than $4 billion out of private health insurance.
But should people be rewriting transcripts? Would you
well, it's very
advise
clear.
them to be doing that?
Tony Abbott's been entirely consistent on this point. He has said that where it is affordable for us to do so, we would absolutely want to see the restoration of the private health insurance rebate.
Okay.
We are not the ones who have proposed this cut, as this government has done, and it's to fuel their reckless spending.
Just quickly, you'll finish, about 20 seconds.
Well, of course, what we've seen here is negativity infecting Tony Abbott's brain, even when he contradicts his own policies. But, I mean, quite frankly, you have to look at that interview and just say this was a whole lot of sound bites, just soundbite after soundbite after soundbite. No detail, no policy, no information. So really, Tony Abbott's got a lot of questions to answer.
Amanda Rishworth, Kelly O'Dwyer, thanks for that. That's all for the show. The news is next.